off we go. Right, so this was another one that was donated to me by Chris Cook, who is here. But this has recently been covered about not even a week ago. Maltman Mike, who I heartily recommend you follow on Facebook and also subscribe to his videos on YouTube. I'll put his name up here so that you know what to look for on YouTube. He's got a range of videos on there, video logs he calls them, with him and a couple of mates of his. He's got a Danish friend called the Whisky Viking. They do whiskey distillery tours together. Really, really nice bloke, really friendly, lovely fella, and yeah, he's well worth checking out and following. So he did a video log very recently of the Ardmore Legacy. Now, Ardmore is recently had a bit of a checkered history because of what they've done and where we are with the legacy at the moment. Now, Ardmore was built in 1898 by a man called Adam Teacher, who was the son of William Teacher, who was the founder of the Teacher's Blend, which essentially Ardmore, the distillery, was set up to satisfy the demand for teachers. So they were making whiskey at the Ardmore Distillery purely to go into teachers to make their blend. So up until 2007, up until 2007, it was quite hard to find any official bottlings of it on its own because so much of it was used for teachers. It's one of the largest producing distilleries in Scotland simply because of the amount that it has to make for teachers. And because teachers is such a big brand, such a big seller, has such high demand, there isn't really that much spare stock for them to be able to release as a single malt official bottling. So, like I say, up to 2007, wasn't that much available kind of on its own as a single malt. Now, Beam Suntory bought the distillery from Allied Domecq in 2005, and in 2007 released an official bottling of Ardmore that was called the Traditional. Now, this was, I think it was 100% peated barley. Now, Ardmore has been known as one of the very few distilleries in Scotland, and I'll put a map of it up here because I haven't even told you where it is. It's in Speyside. That's where it is, in Speyside. It was one of the very few Speyside distilleries that used peated malt and got a bit of a reputation for it, and that was what was giving teachers this kind of hint of smokiness. So I'm pretty certain the Traditional was 100% peated. It was released at 46%, and it wasn't chill filtered. They used something called barrier filtering, which is, to put it bluntly, kind of like running your whiskey through a coffee filter or something like that. It's an actual barrier that stops certain particles running through, and the whiskey goes through. So it's not as precise as chill filtering, and it doesn't filter as much as chill filtering does. So chill filtering gets a bit of a bad reputation, and some people believe that it really does truly affect the whiskey and you have a poorer whiskey because of it. Personally speaking, I don't really give a monkeys. It's one of those things, people choose to do it, people don't choose to do it, whatever. It's whatever goes in the bottle, I will drink that and I'll judge that on its merits. And I've had some unchill filtered and chill filtered whiskey. It's very difficult to find two like identically produced whiskies, one of which has been filtered, one of which hasn't. I couldn't tell an awful lot of it, to be perfectly honest, and people get far too het up about this, but it's out there in the industry. So the Traditional was barrier filtered, so there was an argument that you was kind of losing as much out of the whiskey as you were if it was chill filtered. So the Traditional looked like this, quite distinctive packaging. I can remember us selling it in the whiskey shop, and it was pretty smoky. There was a nice smoky tang to it. And in 2014, they then decided that they were going to change the Traditional to one called the Ardmore Legacy. Now, the Ardmore Legacy looks like this, and instead of it being barrier filtered, it's now chill filtered, and instead of it being 46%, it's now 40%. And this hasn't gone down particularly well. There's also an argument that the Traditional didn't have colouring added to it. Not 100% certain if that is actually the case or not, but the Legacy does, because it doesn't say it on the label. So in kind of like in traditional whiskey drinkers, that was not seen as a particularly good thing, because you've reduced the ABV, and normally that's to a detriment. And if you're chill filtering rather than barrier filtering, or filtering at all, you're actually, chill filtering is taking more out of the whiskey and affecting the flavour even more so. So you're filtering it and you're reducing the alcoholic content. You're basically weakening it as much as you can, almost. It's also 80% peated malt and 20% unpeated as well. And like I say, I'm fairly certain the traditional was 100% peated. So it's not gone down particularly well. Pricing wise, it's about 30 quid, and it's not that much cheaper than the traditional was. I think it's about the same price. So for a lot of people, it was a bit like, okay, so you're knocking it down, you're filtering it even more, and yet you're expecting us to pay the same amount of whiskey that's got, in our eyes, less in it. So it's not, it's a bit one. It's one of those where obviously a decision was taken higher up within the business, and a lot of whiskey drinkers are going, well, that's a decision taken by somebody that clearly doesn't drink whiskey. Well, I'm not going to throw my tuppence worth in, because I've got better things to be worrying about. I'm just going to try the whiskey and see what it's like. If you want to get into an argument about it, that's absolutely fine. There's Facebook groups out there where you can go and rant and rave and do everything like that. But I'm just going to judge this whiskey on the merits of it being in my glass at the moment. So, colour-wise, it's not obvious there's colouring put into it, to be perfectly honest. So, it may well be, but looking at that, if it has, they've not put a lot in, to be perfectly honest. It's non-age statement as well, so there could be young whiskies, there could be old whiskies in there, so it's possible that it's only a 5-year-old and they have added some colouring in to make it look more like whiskey. Who knows? Now this is really quite dry on the nose. It's 40%, and yet it smells like it's sort of 50 plus. It's a real dry nose, and it gets you at the back of your nose, and it's a burning sensation. There's a nuttiness to it. There's a slight leatheriness to it as well, kind of a new car leather. There's saltiness on there as well, and there is smoke, but it's like a dry smoke. Yeah, more saltiness coming through, salt and pepper. But yeah, very dry nose. It's a little bit harsh, and it's a little bit eye-watering as well. Ooh, wow. Smokiness is kicking through at the end, but initially it's quite hot. And if I was trying it, say, blind, I'd say this is like 48%. It's really sharp. It's really quite dry. There is smokiness in there, but this dryness overpowers everything almost. It's really difficult to pick out flavours on this. There's not a huge amount of smoke. You know, if you're saying it's 80% peated and 20% unpeated, it's difficult to say how peated that malt is, because it's certainly not Islay levels of smokiness. It's not an iodine medicinal peatiness. There's a very, very slight hint there, but not a great deal at all. Even the smokiness to it is, it's not bonfire smoke. It's a very dry kind of, almost like a barbecue smoke, but it's not barbecued meats. It's like the dryness of a barbecue without anything on it that's kind of died down, and you've got that heat coming up and the smoke coming up, but it's a very dry heat. It's really very tight. There is a bit of sweetness there, but not a huge amount. Again, the smokiness is there, but it's very much as an aftertaste and almost as an afterthought. It's hot. It really dries your mouth out. It's really like, yeah, I need some water now. Not brilliantly well balanced, to be perfectly honest. Quite woody, quite oaky. No age statement on it, and I'm willing to bet it's quite young, you know, maybe even 6 to 8 year old, that sort of thing. Because it's really tight, it's really kind of like, and it just doesn't mellow out. The finish, there's not a lot to the finish. What there is a very distant, far off kind of hint of this barbecue dryness, but again, it dissipates quite quickly. It's not a particularly well balanced whiskey, unfortunately. It's a bit like sucking on a bit of cask, where you get this woodiness to it, but it dries your mouth out because it sucks all the moisture out. And then a slight aftertaste of smoky woodiness. So it's kind of like, almost as though you've got an empty cask that's been charred, that's had whiskey in it. So they've charred it, they've put whiskey in it, they've taken the whiskey out, the wood's still a bit damp, and you've broken off a bit of the wood, and you're just sucking on it. It's not that great, unfortunately. Nah, not great at all. To be perfectly honest, Maltman Mike wasn't that impressed with it either. I thought I'd give it a chance, but sorry Ardmore, but you've not really done yourself any favours with that. Now the Traditional was quite highly regarded, and it would be interesting to try and get hold of that, because I think that was quite well received. But this, nah, can't recommend it. It's a nay from me, unfortunately. So sorry, Chris, I know you donated it to me. I'd be interested to know what you thought. So if you want to jot some notes down in the comments, I'd be interested to know whether you like it or not, or maybe that was why you gave it to me, because you were trying to get rid of it. But yeah, not a great whiskey, a bit of one of the weaker ones I've had, unfortunately. But hey, we live and learn. It's another one off the list. It's one that I can say that I've tried it, and unfortunately wouldn't recommend it, but they're not all going to be fantastic, unfortunately. If they were, hey, everybody would be doing it. Right, that's that. I shall see you next one. Cheers.